Welcome back. The amount of houses for sale in the United States just hit a 4.5-year high, yet home buying demand fell to the lowest level since 2020. Our housing market is experiencing some very big changes right now, so we're going to talk about that in today's video based on this report posted a few days ago from Redfin. So I don't want to waste your time. Let's begin. And pardon my voice, I've been sick for a while here. Anyways, housing supply, a measure of the amount of houses for sale in the United States, rose to the highest level since June of 2020. But housing demand, they're defining housing demand as contracts being signed between buyers and sellers or pending home sales. That fell to the lowest level since 2020 as mortgage rates hit an 8-month high. Sellers are making moves because they're tired of waiting for rates to fall, but buyers are skittish amid economic uncertainty and rising home prices, which are up by about 4% year over year. So also leave me a comment below if you guys are waiting for home prices to decrease as well, if you guys are kind of skittish about our economy right now. Now, speaking of mortgage rates, let's talk about that. Here's a chart over the past 10 years, according to our good Uncle Fred. And of course, the source here is Freddie Mac. And by the way, if you guys are just curious, you can edit this graph. You can look at monthly rates or look at weekly rates as well. So anyways, looking at monthly rates, I'm going to look at a 10-year chart. In January, the average 30-year fixed rate, according to Freddie Mac, was at 6.96%, a little bit higher compared to December at 6.72%, but at 6.96%, that's the highest levels since May of 2024. Also, going all the way back until January of 2020, that was obviously right before COVID, the average 30-year fixed rate was at 3.6%. January of 2019, it was at just under 4.5%. So we have historically high rates right now compared to the past 10 years. However, looking at the chart ever since the early 1970s, you can see how high rates were in the 80s. We topped out at around 18% for average 30-year fix back in November of 1981. But one can make a strong argument that the housing market was a lot different than we have today because of high home prices, couple that with high rates that we're seeing today. So going back to Redfin's report regarding pending home sales in January, that fell to lowest level on record. By the way, on record, their data goes back to 2012 though. So it could be potentially higher compared to 2008 or 2009, for example. Anyways, pending home sales in January fell to the lowest level on record aside from the start of the pandemic. Of course, I'm an agent here in Sacramento. We saw a huge decrease in contracts being signed when we had stay-at-home orders, right? A lot of people took their houses off the market and sales basically went to zero, right in, when was that? Back in April, May 2020, somewhere around there. So in any case, so they did drop by 4.2% month over month, the largest decrease on a seasonally adjusted basis since August of 2023. They provided this as well. This is really great. They show going all the way back until January of 2012. So pending home sales hit the lowest level since April of 2020, which is right there. January, around 500,000 pending sales. Looking at January of 2019, for example, let's look at that. Back then, just over 600,000. Therefore, pending home sales have decreased by about 25% since then. My biggest takeaway regarding this is that it's pretty astonishing that sales are the lowest level since April of 2020, despite the fact we have a lot more house for sale in the US. Of course, every market's different, but take a look at this. So for the US as a whole, inventory rose to the highest level since June of 2020. Just under 1.8 million houses for sale. I believe this only includes single family houses, but don't quote me on that. 1.8 million in January has been increasing virtually every single month ever since really mid 2023. However, we're still lower compared to pre-COVID levels. So 1.8 million right now. Let's look at January of 2020, which is right there. Back then there was 2.1 million. So clearly from this chart, which goes back to 2012, you can see we had a lack of house for sale really right before the pandemic, to be honest, but of course, right after the onset of COVID as well. But it's good to see we have been seeing this uptick of inventory if you guys are looking to buy a house. But we still have a long ways to go if we want to see a more normal level of houses for sale. Here's yet another way to look at this, going over the past, 25 years. This is from calculatedriskblog.com. The data here only goes back to mid-23, but as you guys can see, I mean, clearly we have a lack of houses for sale nationwide right after the onset of COVID. And looking at 2007, 2008, we had over 4 million, or over 3.7 million, I should say, back then. And really in late 2007, over 4 million houses for sale. But really, historically speaking, before the Great Recession and also just after that, we should have around 2 million houses for sale. But ever since really 2017, we have been having this kind of a downward trajectory. But it's great to see that inventory has been increasing as of late, though. Going back to Redfin's article, it says this lock-in effect is fading. A lot of homeowners who have scored ultra low mortgage rates during the pandemic have been staying put because moving could mean taking on a higher rate, but most people can't stay put forever. I think a really good way to look at this is the measure of new listings according to Realtor.com for the month of January. And this is kind of a mess, but I love how they share pre-COVID levels. So this dot, which is right there, is January of 2025. So around 327,000 new listings. In other words, 327,000 people decide to list their house for sale. That's an increase of around 11% compared to 2024, which is this brown line. Below is 2023. In gold is 22. And here's 2021. And pre-COVID really is right here, a clump of 2017 through 2019. So I want to mention this because I made this comment on my channel a couple of days ago, because this lock-in effect is fading. We saw a lack of new listings really in 23, to say the least. Of course, a huge fallout in late 22 when mortgage rates doubled, right? But here's what I want you guys to kind of take home with. So in January this year, around 300, let's just call it 330,000, right? Pre-COVID, we should be having around 375 to about 400,000. So the gap between this year compared to pre-pandemic levels is actually much more narrow compared to May of 2024, for example, which is right here. May 24, there was around 425,000 new listings. However, pre-COVID, let's just say 17 through 2019, over 550,000. Let's just say on average around 575,000 compared to May of 24, just under 450,000. So obviously, as you guys can see, the gap between this last year compared to pre-COVID is actually getting more narrow. As Redfin says here, most people can't stay put forever. I'm personally seeing that people are moving to live closer to family members, for example, and they're just opting to sell because they, again, can't wait forever, or they need more room in their houses because they have a growing family. Also, houses are taking longer to sell. The typical home in the United States in January was on the market for 56 days. That's a week longer compared to 1 year ago, and that marks the longest period of any January since 2020. So let's have a look at that on Redfin's data center. This only goes back to 22 though. So days in the market around 56 days, around 7 days longer compared to at this time in 2024. Obviously, it's way higher compared to the craziness of early 22, when it only took about 35 days to sell a house. Now it's at around 57 days. So basically what we're seeing right now is that the days in the market is the highest level since 2020, but we're seeing this kind of seasonal uptick. What we should expect to see is that days in the market kind of decreases as we approach the home buying season, or the spring home buying season. And then we see a seasonal uptick again once we hit late summer this year. So we'll have to see how this plays out, though, to see if the gap between this year and last year grows to more than 7 days. So in a nutshell, what we're basically seeing right now, we're seeing uptick of new supply in the market, a decrease of contracts being signed. In other words, an increase in supply, a decrease in demand, which is causing inventory levels to increase. So here's the Redfin's data center again. So new listings for the 4 weeks ended February 9th, was up by 7.4%. So new supply up by 7.4%, yet pending home sales actually decrease to at least a 3-year low right now, a decrease of 6%. So despite the fact that we have around 7.4% more houses for sale or new houses that got listed, pending home sales actually moved in the opposite direction. As you guys can see right here, active listings is kind of going flat over the past couple weeks here, but it is up by 11% year over year. As you guys can see, it's normal to see inventory levels kind of decrease to start the year, then to see a seasonal uptick and then peak really in late summer. We have been seeing this kind of late peak in 24. So for example, inventory peaked in October last year, which is unusual. It's more normal to see inventory kind of peak around August or September, for example. So again, we'll have to see how that plays out. Another reason why home buying demand has been decreasing is, of course, because it's expensive to buy houses right now. And so looking at Redfin's data center regarding that, the median sold price is up by 4% year over year. It's at $376,000. I believe that includes condos and single family houses, because according to this article right here, the median sold price for single family houses is just under $419,000. And that, by the way, is 45% higher than January before the pandemic started. On top of that, deals are falling through. Home purchases were canceled at the highest January rate in records dating back to 2017. So roughly 41,000 purchase agreements were canceled. That's equal to about 14.3% of houses that went under contract in January. That's up from the 13.4% rate we saw 1 year ago. On top of that, of course, we have a lot of uncertainty. We have tariffs, reduction in the federal workforce, return to office mandates, high mortgage rates, etc. And this, of course, is all giving buyers and sellers cold feet. So here's a look at home price growth on a year-over-year basis going back to 2012. And really what caught my attention was this right here. Back in May of 2021 compared to May 2020, the home prices increased by 26%. And back then, for all you guys who have been following me for years now, I was making videos left and right regarding how this was not sustainable to have an increase in prices up by 26% in one single year. And then here we go. The growth rate in prices were decreasing through really April of 2023. So right now in January, we're up by 4.1%. Again, only looking at single family houses, that's more or less in line with the long-term average of around 4 to 5%. Much more sustainable than the double-digit growth rate we saw really from, when was this? August 2020 through June of 2022. Now looking ahead as well, we should expect to see home price growth soften further as well, because we're seeing fewer houses selling over the seller's asking price on a national level, and homes also selling much lower than the seller's final list price. So for example, the share of houses selling above the seller's, keywords here, final list price is only at 22.4%. This means, of course, that 78% of the houses that did sell in January sold at or below the seller's asking price. Also, that ratio, the sale price to final list price ratio, was at 98.2%, which means that out of all the houses that sold in January, they sold for 1.8% below the seller's final list price. Now, every market's different. They look at the 50 most populous metros. So regarding prices, that rose the most in Pittsburgh, up by 15.4%. Then we have St. Louis, Anaheim, California, all up by more than 13%. They also only fell in 4 metros. So 46 of the 50 biggest cities reported gains in prices year over year. So home prices are not crashing. So the areas in which prices did decrease year over year were Tampa, Florida, down by 4%, Austin, Texas, 3.7%, San Francisco down by 2.2%, and Jacksonville, Florida, down by 1.3%. In regards to home buying demand, this is pending sales, that rose the most in Portland, Oregon, up by 11.4%. Then we have San Jose, California, and Milwaukee, Wisconsin. They decreased the most in Detroit, down by 19.2%. Miami, down by 18.1%. Miami is an interesting one because that was one of the markets that increased the most in prices for years. And now they're experiencing a downturn here where sales are down by 18% year over year. Also down by 17.4% in Atlanta, Georgia. Obviously, pending sales is a future indication of closed home sales, which is a lead indicator, but a lag indicator is closed home sales, houses that actually did close or the sale was finalized. So home sales rose the most in Portland, up by 13%. Then we have Providence, Rhode Island, and Boston. They decreased the most in Detroit, Miami, and Fort Lauderdale, Florida, down by 8.2%. New listings rose the most in Seattle, up by 30.8%. They decreased the most in Kansas City, Missouri, down by 11.2%. Now, talking about active listings, this is kind of an important distinction here. New listings is a measure of people listing their house for sale. Active listings is kind of like the pool of all the houses available for sale. So looking at active listings or house inventory, it increased the most in Oakland, California. Interesting there, up by 31%. Then we have Seattle up by 29%, and Cincinnati, Ohio, up by 28%. In contrast, they actually decreased in only 6 metros. So this means that 44 of the 50 biggest cities reported gains of inventory levels. Again, the difference between inventory levels looking at pre-COVID levels is actually getting a little bit more narrow. So the biggest decreases of active listings is New York, down by 3.9%. Then we have New Jersey down by 1.9%, and Chicago is down by 1.5%. Now, speaking of very big differences here, take a look at this because in New York, New Jersey, 56.7% of houses sold over the seller's asking price, the highest share amongst these metros. Next came San Jose, California. After that, though, look at this. The lowest shares were in West Palm Beach, Florida. Only 5.5% of the time, houses sold over the seller's asking price. Also, you have a low level in Fort Lauderdale, Florida at 5.9%, and Miami, Florida at 7.5%. This is really indicative of inventory levels because inventory in Florida is spiking, to say the least, whereas in the Northeast, they have a lack of houses for sale, and therefore it's a competitive market. With that said, please comment below with your thoughts regarding today's video. Also, what do you guys see in your neck of the woods? I would love to hear your insights regarding what's happening in your area. So please leave a comment below. Please like and subscribe. Have an amazing day, and we'll see you in the next video.